At the age of 18, Ethan and I did all kinds of absurd things in the rented apartment. He proposed to me with a cheap ring. When I was 24, he was found by the Thompson family and became a young master of a powerful and prestigious family. However, he got engaged to someone else behind my back. On our anniversary, I wanted to give him a surprise and came home early. I happened to hear his friends sneer. "Why are you still living in this shabby place? Are you really going to go back on the engagement with the Edwards family for your first love?" Ethan bit on his cigarette and laughed. "It's just for fun. With her current status, she doesn't deserve me." Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now the story begins. The door was ajar, and the words hit me unprepared. I stood stunned at the door and looked up at the people in the rented apartment. Except for Ethan, they were all young masters. Any pair of their shoes was worth more than my annual internship salary. Hearing Ethan's words, they laughed even more mockingly. "Those worthless things she gave you. I'd feel shabby carrying them in my pocket when going out." TSK. It sounds harsh, but it's the truth. My eyelashes quivered, and I embarrassedly clenched the gift in my hand that I had saved up for 3 months. It was the best thing I could offer Ethan. "When are you going to break up with her?" The smoke blurred Ethan's expression. I couldn't see clearly, and could only hear his indifferent voice. "It's just an engagement. There's no need to break up. She's really stupid and won't notice." There was another burst of sneering laughter in the room. "She's really stupid. She's been led around by you. But what about that young lady Sylvia? Can you hide it from her?" I had heard the name Sylvia from my colleagues. She was a real young lady from a wealthy family. She was playful and liked to play tricks on people. And she boasted that there was no man in City A that she couldn't chase after. But I heard that the man she was chasing this time was a good match for her, and they were planning to get married. Ethan showed no emotional fluctuation when he heard the name. He extinguished his cigarette and started to shoo people away. "Are you done? Chloe will be back early today." Those young masters left. I hid around the corner and heard them complaining about the place being remote and shabby as they walked. I also heard them say that the engagement between the two families would be next month. Next month. In the stuffy corridor, I suddenly felt so cold that I was shivering. I slowly recalled. It turned out that the person the Thompson family found and celebrated about a year ago, which caused a sensation in the whole city, was really Ethan. I remembered that at that time. I looked at Ethan in the kitchen and asked him regretfully, "You all have the last name Thompson. Why aren't you the one?" Ethan asked with a smile. "Why should I be?" I looked at him without blinking. "Because you're really different." Ethan didn't know. In the town where my mother took me to after she remarried, the first time I saw Ethan, I felt that he didn't belong there. He was smart, indifferent, yet incredibly good-looking. He was nothing like that stepfather who only knew how to drink and beat people. Ethan didn't say anything more at that time, but that night, that post was deleted completely. After that, things related to the Thompson family never appeared in my life again. From that moment on, the person I had liked for a full 8 years had already been hiding things from me. The corridor gradually became dim, and the endless darkness seemed to swallow people up. I suddenly desperately wanted to escape from this place. It didn't matter where I went. I didn't want to face Ethan. But the first step I took out of the corner, I met Ethan's gaze, who was standing at the door. In just a few seconds, Ethan had already guessed something. The guilt and regret I had imagined didn't appear on his face. He laughed. He showed the usual expression that was neither a look of being a bit headache nor a look of being in trouble. I was too familiar with that look. It was very much like the expression on Ethan's face when my stepfather was about to beat me and he witnessed that scene. A look of being headache, impatient, and yet having to face it. At that time, he glanced at me indifferently and had no intention of coming over at all. But in the end, he still pulled me behind him. Later, he protected me again and again with a cold face. He was also very young at that time and couldn't withstand the strength of an adult, so he was always covered in blood. I hugged Ethan and cried sadly, soaking half of his shoulder with my tears. He was the only one who protected me after my mother passed away. Ethan always said that I was useless. He said how would I live without him? But he never said that he would leave me. Memories overlapped with reality, and I saw Ethan sigh and walk towards me just like he did back then. In fact, I was extremely timid. At this moment, I even blamed myself for not hiding well. I wanted to hide completely and escape from this problem. But in the end, I still stared at Ethan and asked him blankly, "You're going to get engaged?" Along with the rumbling of thunder, came Ethan's voice. He looked down at me and frankly admitted, "It's an arranged marriage by the family. I can't refuse. They will never accept someone as worthless as you into the Thompson family. Can you understand? But Chloe, I won't leave you." He gently wiped away my tears with his fingers. "I will still protect you. Just like before." I realized something was wrong. What do you mean? What did he mean by not leaving me? What was the same as before? Ethan's eyes were pitch black. Through those eyes, I saw myself in a sorry and pitiful state. In fact, I had a lot of questions to ask. But now I couldn't say a single word. I looked at Ethan and asked him slowly, word by word, "Ethan, you want me to be your mistress?" Ethan didn't deny it. From the moment he was found by the Thompson family, he knew that the Thompson family would never accept me. He agreed to the arranged marriage while continuing to act as if nothing had happened with me here. Just as he said. I was so stupid that I would believe whatever he said. I tried hard to open my eyes wide and not let the tears fall, but I just couldn't control it. The window in the corridor was half open, and the heavy rain was pouring down wildly. I confessed my love to Ethan in the heavy rain back then. Now it was going to end in the heavy rain too. But Ethan didn't take my words of breaking up seriously. He watched me cry and make a scene calmly, then took me back to the living room and casually asked me what I wanted to eat. He seemed so certain that I wouldn't refuse him, let alone leave him. It wasn't until I shook off his hand and started packing my luggage that there was finally some emotion in his eyes when he looked at me. "Chloe, do you really have to do this?" I didn't say anything. Ethan's hand gripping my wrist tightened even more. He looked at me quietly, as if he really didn't understand. I said we could still be the same as before. "I can give you whatever you want now. Do you really want to go back to the hard days before?" I looked at him numbly. "Ethan, I won't be a mistress. I can live without relying on you." "Without relying on me?" Ethan laughed. "Chloe, why are you still so naive? Without me, could you have graduated safely from that sleazy school leader? Without me, could you have met an expert so coincidentally during the surgery? Also," Ethan leaned closer to me and said mockingly, "if you really care so much about other people's opinions, why did you like me, confess to me, and even kiss me, your nominal brother?" Back then, I felt cold all over and slowly looked up to meet Ethan's gaze. It was so sarcastic and sharp. When it fell on me, it was like a knife for slow slicing. "Chloe," Ethan smiled at me, "stop pretending. You're not as pure and great as you claim to be." Ethan said that I was really stupid and that all the choices I made from childhood to adulthood were foolish. It was the same when I didn't dare to resist my stepfather and endured the beatings in the past. And it was the same now when I left him. He vowed that I would definitely come back to him within a week. This week was probably the most difficult week for me. I ran into obstacles in everything. My work wasn't going well, and I couldn't even rent a house. Every time at a crucial moment, someone would offer more money to interrupt. I had to temporarily stay at a college friend's place. But early this morning, she told me that I couldn't stay there anymore. I looked at the phone clenched in her hand and said softly, "Ethan contacted you, didn't he?" She sighed. "Even if you've broken up, he shouldn't be so ruthless, should he?" She didn't know much about my relationship with Ethan, and I didn't want to involve her anymore. I could only move back to the hotel. Before I left, Daisy insisted on transferring some money to me. "I know your internship salary isn't much. Use it first and pay me back when you become a full-time employee." I didn't accept it, but the news of becoming a full-time employee was indeed today. However, when I arrived at the company, the atmosphere was extremely strange. Many people looked at me with complex expressions. My heart beat faster, and I suddenly had a bad premonition. Before I could think, I was called by the boss. It was silent in the office. The boss took a sip of tea and told me straightforwardly, I was the most qualified to become a full-time employee among this batch of interns. But not anymore. The company has received a rare and valuable order. But that company has a requirement. I met the boss's gaze, and my heart sank little by little. "What's the requirement?" The boss took another sip of hot tea and slowly said, "He requires to fire you." It rained on the way back to the hotel, and the raindrops were so cold that they seemed to penetrate into my heart. Ethan had been waiting at the hotel entrance for a long time. When he saw me, he got out of the car with an umbrella, wearing his usual smile on his face. "Chloe, why can't you get rid of the habit of forgetting to bring an umbrella when it rains?" I stared at the hand holding the umbrella. Ethan was still wearing the ring with which he had proposed to me. I found it ridiculous, but I was too tired to laugh. The wet and sticky coat clung to my body, making my voice tremble when I spoke. Ethan, how far are you going to go before you stop? I did like you and rely on you in the past, but I've never done anything to hurt you, have I? I prepared for a long time on our anniversary. The gift I gave you was bought with the salary I saved for half a year. At that time, I even thought that I would become a full-time employee soon. After things were stable, we could move to a slightly bigger room. Why? I looked up at him. Why do you have to treat me like this? Why me? Ethan didn't respond. He looked at my hand and instead asked me, "Where's the ring?" It was the ring with which he had proposed to me in the rented apartment. I had worn it for a full 6 years. It wasn't that he hadn't bought me a new ring, but I just liked that one. I lost it. I turned around and walked back. Do whatever you want, Ethan. My answer won't change. Surprisingly, Ethan made a concession. He said he could stay out of the matter of my becoming a full-time employee. But he had a condition. What? He gestured at the increasingly heavy rain. It's very cold. Can we go inside and talk? The hotel I found temporarily was simple. Ethan didn't speak until I changed out of my soaked coat. He sent me an address and said there would be a cocktail party tomorrow night and asked me to come for a final farewell. But on the way there the next day, for some reason, my heart suddenly started beating extremely violently. It was a high-end club, something I wouldn't even look at on a normal day. Ethan's private room was on the top floor. I saw a lot of people inside. I saw the wine they casually opened. It was enough to buy my cheap rented apartment. At that moment, I finally had a concrete sense of Ethan's current status and the gap between him and me. There, I also saw Sylvia, whom everyone jokingly called the young lady. She sat beside Ethan, beautiful and bright. Before I could figure out why Sylvia was there, I suddenly heard her say that she was going to give Ethan a surprise. Vaguely, I seemed to hear my name. I suddenly tensed up. Sylvia knew about my existence. I saw her casually make a phone call to someone. After a few brief words, the smile on her face became even brighter. With the pride of a successful prank, she tilted her head and looked at his expression, then asked him, I accidentally got Chloe fired. Ethan, you won't blame me, will you? Chloe, unemployed. I stood there blankly and stunned. I felt the coldness gradually penetrate my limbs and bones, until it climbed up to my heart, causing dense and sharp pain. It turned out that the surprise Sylvia mentioned was to ruin the job that I had just become a full-time employee of today. Ethan sat beside her and looked at her calmly. He didn't interrupt her, nor did he blame Sylvia. He didn't even change his expression. I had never thought his indifferent face was so disgusting. He clearly promised me that he wouldn't interfere with my work. I suddenly thought of the words I said yesterday. I remembered the smile on Ethan's face before he left yesterday, which I couldn't figure out. I thought that because of the words I said, he was slightly touched, that he had a little bit of pity for me, but there was nothing. The smile on Ethan's face at that time. Was he laughing at me like a hardworking and ridiculous clown? A clown who had been played around by him and was still busy planning an impossible future with him. But now, as a clown, I still had to go up and find him, because I saw Sylvia reach out and hook out a jade pendant hanging on a black woven rope from around Ethan's neck. I slowly blinked my eyes. I finally saw the pendant in her hand clearly. It was the only thing my mother left me as a memento. It turned out that Ethan's proposal to sit in my hotel room yesterday wasn't because he was afraid of the cold, nor was it because he really intended to make a concession. It was to search for this. Ethan treated Sylvia just like he used to treat me. He granted every request. He really casually took off the pendant and threw it to Sylvia. The last taut string in my mind suddenly snapped. I had nothing left. I even lost my job. I couldn't lose the last memento of my mother as well. I pushed the door with all my might, but it didn't budge at all. Ethan. I saw Ethan look up. Under the gorgeous lights, through the glass. He just stood there quietly, looking at me with his usual smile. There was no intention of coming to open the door. I instantly understood. All the words he said yesterday were lies. He was angry that I had refuted him, angry that I had lost the ring. He was warning me, taking revenge, forcing me to compromise with the jade pendant. Behind the door, the corridor was quiet, but the music playing in the room was deafening. It drowned out my voice. I almost broke down as I said, Ethan, I don't want the job anymore. I'll find the ring and return it to you today. Please, return my mother's jade pendant to me. The emotions that had been pent up for a week burst out. I shouted like a madman, attracting the attention of many people in the corridor. But Ethan still didn't move. The music happened to enter the last few seconds of its quiet ending. Everything around was silent. Through the glass, I watched helplessly as Sylvia, after getting the jade pendant, tossed it in disgust twice. After, accidentally, slipping her hand, the jade pendant fell from her hand. After a clear and cheap-sounding noise, it shattered. The scene seemed to freeze suddenly. Ethan stood up abruptly. He stared at the broken pendant and his face uncontrollably changed color. The scene suddenly became chaotic. They seemed to be saying something, but my brain was buzzing, and I couldn't hear anything clearly. I didn't know how I got back to the hotel. When I came to my senses, I was soaked through by the rain. There was a similarly wet person standing at the door. The face was familiar. He was one of Ethan's friends. Ethan has been taken back by the Thompson family now. He asked me to tell you for sure that things aren't as you think. He didn't mean to destroy the jade pendant. Regarding your job, Ethan will take care of it. There's a problem on the Thompson family's side. He'll come to find you as soon as he's free. Don't. Before he could finish, I slammed the door shut. Silence returned to my ears. Water was dripping from my sleeves tick by tick. I quietly looked at the broken jade pendant in my hand. After I don't know how long, my phone suddenly vibrated. A message of being fired and a transfer of compensation popped up. It turned out that the promise of making me a full-time employee was just Ethan playing tricks on me. Sylvia couldn't tolerate my existence, and Ethan tacitly approved of her nonsense. It was all a lie. I no longer believed Ethan's hypocritical lies. After blocking all of Ethan's contact information, I bought the earliest ticket to leave City A. I never wanted to come back again. Ethan was locked up. Even when he was forcefully taken home, he didn't have the chance to say a word to Chloe. The engagement with the Edwards family was getting closer, and during this period, the Thompson family wouldn't allow him to act recklessly anymore. The doors and windows of the room were tightly closed. Ethan hung his head and quietly looked at the red exclamation mark on the screen. Chloe had blocked him. She blocked him on the phone, Instagram, everything. It was something he expected. He had indeed gone too far this time, but Chloe was so stupid. If he didn't do this, she wouldn't agree with what he said. After the engagement banquet, Chloe would still realize that she couldn't live without him. She would still come back to him just like before, with nothing changed. But somehow, the unease and restlessness in his heart grew stronger and stronger. This restlessness continued until his friend Cecil called. I delivered all the messages you asked me to, and everything is done. Ethan slowly let out a sigh of relief. He leaned his head back and changed to a lazy sitting posture. Then asked Cecil, "What about her? Is she still throwing a tantrum?" Cecil was silent for a few seconds this time. Ethan closed his eyes. Not sleeping all night made him extremely tired. But he waited for a minute and still didn't get an answer from Cecil. Just as Ethan couldn't help but was about to speak, Cecil took a deep breath and blurted out all at once. "But there's one thing I have to tell you. Ethan, Chloe is gone. We searched all over City A but couldn't find her. She checked out of the hotel early the next morning. I guess she left completely." After the words fell, the room fell into a few seconds of almost blank silence. Ethan held the phone, and his face gradually turned pale in the dim light. His Adam's apple twitched, as if he didn't understand. He asked Cecil in a hoarse voice, "What did you say?" Cecil didn't repeat it. He knew that Ethan didn't need a repetition. There was no sound from Ethan's side for a long time. It was so long that Cecil almost thought Ethan had fainted. Only then did Ethan squeeze out a from his throat and hung up the phone. In the half-month that followed, there was no news of Ethan. Although Cecil didn't think much of Chloe, he helped search for her for a few days. When there was no news, he gave up. In his opinion, Ethan would forget about this person soon enough. In their circle, there was never anything called deep affection. What's more, the news of Ethan's engagement had already been released, and the time was drawing near. Ethan couldn't possibly go back on it. But until before the engagement, the small group chat among Cecil and their friends suddenly exploded. Some people said that Ethan was out of his mind and really didn't plan to get engaged anymore. Cecil's head ached when he glanced at the chat records. When he rushed over, Ethan had already been beaten with a few sticks. Although Ethan was found later by the Thompson family, they cherished him very much. They had rarely even said harsh words to him on normal days. It seemed that they were really furious now. But no matter what was said, Ethan never relented. In the end, The engagement wasn't cancelled, but the time was postponed. Ethan was beaten so badly that he was hospitalized. Who said it was just for fun? Ethan's face was pale. He ignored Cecil's mockery. He just twirled the plain ring on his hand and calmly came up with a reason. After all, Chloe is my sister. She has to get my permission before she leaves. It seemed that he didn't plan to give up on finding her. Cecil was about to mock him a few more words. But when he met Ethan's serious face that showed no sign of joking, he shut up. In fact, he didn't quite understand where Ethan's determination came from. Did he like Chloe? He didn't seem to like her that much. Otherwise, he wouldn't have treated her like that in the first place. Cecil still hadn't forgotten the dull and broken look in Chloe's eyes at the hotel. At that time, even he felt a bit sorry for Chloe. What about the engagement? Are you going to wait until you find Chloe to start it? Ethan didn't say anything. Whatever. Cecil didn't plan to get involved in this matter anymore. The Edwards family could tolerate it until now completely because Miss Sylvia was really in love with Ethan. Sooner or later, Ethan would marry Sylvia. Cecil never doubted that. Especially when they couldn't find Chloe for 2 years. Cecil was even more convinced of this idea. But when everyone thought that Chloe had faded out of their world, Cecil suddenly received a call from Sylvia. On the other end of the phone, she took a deep breath. Cecil, Ethan has found Chloe. He said he wants to take her back to City A. After leaving City A, I changed my phone number and moved to several cities one after another. Finally, I settled down in a coastal city. 2 years passed in the blink of an eye. I didn't expect to see Ethan again. When I arrived at the dinner party with my boss, many people had already arrived at the scene. There were constant conversations around, and it seemed that everyone was discussing someone. Until the moment the door opened, the whole hall fell silent for a second, and everyone looked up. I also looked up. Through the noisy crowd, I saw those extremely familiar eyebrows and eyes at a glance. And behind him, Sylvia, who was still bright and beautiful. It turned out that the protagonists of this dinner party, the people that major companies wanted to make connections with, were them. Just like 2 years ago, they were still the center of attention. Standing together, they were dazzlingly well matched. I had long known that my departure wouldn't cause the slightest change in Ethan's life, but seeing this moment with my own eyes, I still felt a sense of sadness for no reason. I didn't know who bumped into me in the chaos, and the wine in the cup spilled out. My handbag was wet. I put down the wine glass and subconsciously moved a little behind my boss, because I saw Ethan casually glance in this direction. After that glance, he suddenly froze in place. It was only after Sylvia spoke that he seemed to come to his senses and continued walking forward. Many people gathered in Ethan's direction. I let out a sigh of relief and quietly retreated to the corner. But the next second, Ethan suddenly stopped in his tracks, turned around, and walked towards me. Ethan, where are you going? Sylvia behind him changed her expression. Ethan didn't stop. Through the crowd, his gaze steadily landed on me. He really saw me in that glance just now. I took a few steps back and turned to leave, but Ethan quickened his pace, and the next second, he grabbed my wrist. Ethan lowered his eyes and just looked at me quietly for 2 seconds. Suddenly, he laughed. It really is you, Chloe. After leaving City A, I would occasionally dream of reuniting with Ethan. In my dreams, he was always cold, looking at me with a familiar mocking smile. Not the smile he had now, a pure and joyful smile. Ethan seemed really happy to see me, but I wasn't happy. The night I left in the heavy rain had become a nightmare that I couldn't escape from in the past 2 years. I shook off Ethan's hand and took a step back to create some distance, as if he didn't expect me to do this. Ethan's fingers froze in midair. He looked at me, and the smile on his face faded. Don't you have anything to say to me? I retorted. Should I have something to say? Because of these words, the usual coldness returned to Ethan's eyes. He retracted his gaze and left without even looking at me. Until the end of the party, Ethan didn't come over again. At this party, many people came to make connections with the companies behind Ethan and Sylvia and get familiar with them. But Ethan had a cold face all the time, and Sylvia was in an extremely bad mood. Everyone was sensible enough not to step forward and incur their displeasure. I looked at the time, hoping that this party would end soon. Finally, when it was time to leave, Ethan, who had barely spoken, suddenly called out to me. He leaned back in his chair and looked at me, casually asking, "Which company are you from?" Everyone's eyes turned to us. It seemed that there was something going on. My colleague quickly came over to answer. I'm asking her. Ethan was indeed asking me. But he didn't give me a chance to speak. He stared at me with his dark eyes and changed his words. Forget it. Send it to me on Instagram. I had blocked Ethan on Instagram for a long time. He knew that better than anyone. But I didn't want to have any more involvement with him. My colleague's eyes urged me. I met Ethan's cold eyes and looked at him indifferently. The situation became stalemate. The impatience in Ethan's eyes gradually showed. But he still stared at me without moving. Now everyone could sense that something was wrong. It's okay if you don't send it. Ethan ran out of patience. He grabbed my wrist without asking. Then let's go home and talk in detail. He held me tightly. And I couldn't break free. The more I couldn't break free, the more anxious I became. And my palms instantly became sweaty. He really intended to take me away. The moment I raised my hand to hit him, my always silent boss suddenly came over. He stood abruptly between me and Ethan. Sorry to interrupt, but she can't leave for now. Ethan raised his eyelids to look at him. The boss seriously unfolded the coat hanging on his arm. She just wiped her hands on my coat behind my back again. This is the 4th time she's done this month. In view of the promise she made before, she needs to give me a self-criticism tonight. It was a ridiculous reason. Ethan was amused. He looked at me, then at the boss standing beside me who refused to back down, as if he suddenly understood something. The usual mockery and coldness appeared in his eyes. No wonder you didn't want to come back. Ethan laughed again. So you've found a new brother. Come on. Did you beg him to protect you just like you used to beg me? I was suddenly stunned by these words. Ethan's voice was always light, but it hit my heart so heavily that it was hard to breathe. He knew exactly how to hurt me. With a slap, I raised my hand and slapped Ethan. I used a great deal of force, and my fingers went numb from the impact. Yes, a new brother. I laughed and continued following his words. So I don't need you anymore. Can you get lost? Ethan's head was turned to the side by the slap. He lowered his eyes, and the smile on his lips gradually froze. It was quite absurd. At that moment, I actually saw a hint of sadness in Ethan's eyes when he looked up at me. Ethan was stopped by Cecil, who rushed over. With a light tug, he pulled me out of Ethan's grasp. My boss glanced casually at the two of them and let down the sleeves that he had just rolled up. He pushed my shoulder, hinting at me to leave. I didn't stay any longer and turned to walk away. Ethan seemed to say something to Cecil, but I didn't catch it clearly. However, I could feel Ethan's gaze fixed on me without moving. In the end, I could only hear Cecil cursing through gritted teeth in the chaos. Ethan, are you fucking crazy? My boss drove me home. After watching his car leave, I slowly walked towards the residential compound. It was quiet behind me, and the sound of footsteps was getting closer. Someone was following me. I turned my head and, without surprise, met Ethan's gaze. He stood under the dim streetlight, and his coat fluttered in the wind. It seemed that Cecil hadn't been able to stop Ethan. He stared in the direction where my boss had left and asked me, "What's your relationship with him? Do you really consider him as your brother? Or?" Ethan paused for a second and his voice became very soft. "Do you like him?" I didn't know what right Ethan had to question me like this, and I didn't want to discuss these things with him in the middle of the night. "What on earth do you want?" Ethan looked at me quietly and said, "Chloe, come back to City A with me." City A. I felt that the emotions and pain buried deep in my heart were dug out and once again laid bare in front of me in this late night. "What? Do you want me to go back and be your mistress?" I finally couldn't help but ask him sarcastically. "Did you find something interesting about me again tonight? Or have you come up with another way to play tricks on me? Didn't you play enough tricks on me 2 years ago?" "Chloe." Ethan suddenly interrupted me. His expression was still calm, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes that I couldn't understand. "Can you please don't talk to me in this tone?" The autumn wind in late fall made my fingertips cold. I closed my eyes and said, "Get lost." Ethan didn't leave. The blurry figure downstairs in the residential compound remained there until the morning. He looked tired but still casually came up to me and stuffed a bottle of milk and breakfast into my hand. The warmth of the milk spread through my palm, and for a moment, it seemed to briefly bring me back to many ordinary mornings in the past. Perhaps because the wind was cold last night. Ethan's voice was hoarse. "I never thought the jade pendant would break. Regarding your job, I had already found a better one for you at that time. I just wanted to return to our old life. I didn't sleep well that night. I dreamed of the past, Of those memories of hiding behind Ethan and being protected by him in a sorry state. I had to admit that Ethan had occupied most of my life in these 20-odd years. I couldn't forget him in just 2 years. But the pain Ethan brought me was even harder to forget. Stop pretending. I looked up at Ethan and returned the words he had said to me 2 years ago. You're not as affectionate and great as you think you are. Ethan's face paled for a moment. He didn't respond to this and turned to open the car door. I'll drive you to the company. As soon as he finished speaking, my boss's low-key black Bentley stopped in front of me. I got into my boss's car and through the window. I saw Ethan standing there, looking at me without moving. His hand was still on the car door, and his expression became more and more blurred as the distance increased. It was not until Ethan's figure completely disappeared from sight that my boss spoke. Do you need your boss's help? As soon as he said this, I knew my boss was up to his tricks again. Sure enough, the next second he took out a delicate palm-sized golden abacus. Chloe, you dirted my coat again last night, and the money hasn't been deducted yet. If you need my help this time, I can give you a 1% discount on the total amount. My colleague, who had been pretending to be dead on the other side, opened his eyes. Boss, why are you always so keen on exploiting us honest people? The boss raised his eyes. My colleague seemed to have reached his limit. Our team exceeded the task. And the mysterious grand prize you mentioned is just driving us to and from work for a month. The boss put away his golden abacus. Didn't you choose it yourself? When we arrived at the company, my colleague took my arm and walked inside. I really can't stand it. Who would have thought the mysterious grand prize would be this? I should have chosen the bonus honestly. I didn't say anything. My mind was full of Ethan's expression when he was stunned in place. Until I got off work. Ethan was still there. He looked at my boss in the car and asked me softly, do you really like him? What does it have to do with you? Then what about me? Ethan's eyes reflected the setting sun, turning into a continuous patch of red. Chloe, even those who make mistakes should have a chance to atone for their sins. Right. It was getting dark. I moved my fingers and looked at him. Will you do anything I ask? Yes. Ethan was indeed obedient to my every request. I asked Ethan to take a video of the waves for me in the cold night of late fall, to find the bracelet that had fallen into the pool for me, and to buy desserts from the dessert shop in the middle of the night. Ethan almost didn't sleep for several days, and the dark circles under his eyes couldn't be hidden no matter what. But when he looked at me with a smile, his eyes and eyebrows were still filled with joy. At that moment, he seemed to overlap with the Ethan who used to protect me behind him in the past. He returned the box that I had given him a few days ago. Chloe, the jade pendant has been repaired. He paused and lowered his voice a bit. I'm sorry. I really didn't expect to break it that day. The jade pendant in the box was repaired extremely well. As good as new. I examined it carefully for 2 seconds and then carefully put it away. Ethan left. It started to rain not long after he left. And it rained all night. I lay quietly on the sofa and watched the video of Ethan. The seawater was cold, and Ethan's face turned pale from the cold. Early in the morning, someone knocked on my door. It wasn't Ethan. It was my boss. The car happened to break down near your house. It's raining heavily. Do you mind if I stay for a while? It was indeed raining heavily, so I let my boss in. 3 minutes later, I regretted it. He actually asked me to work overtime this weekend. Otherwise, you can just leave. My boss ignored me. He stared at Ethan in the phone video that I had forgotten to turn off. I heard you asked Ethan to buy desserts from that shop. How did you know? My boss evaded the question and asked me out of curiosity. You're a regular customer of that shop, so you should know very well. That dessert shop issued a notice of closure yesterday. Why did you still ask him to buy it even though you knew that? He stopped mid-sentence and his gaze passed through me and looked behind me. That was the direction of the door. I seemed to have forgotten to close the door just now. I was silent for a second and then realized what was going on. I opened the half-closed door and saw Ethan standing at the door. He was pale, soaked through, with water dripping from his hair, and he looked at me and my boss in the room quietly. After a long while, he seemed to find his voice and laughed. Chloe, you're playing tricks on me. I was indeed playing tricks on him. Wanting to see the sea was fake. The bracelet falling into the pool was fake. The dessert shop being open 24 hours a day was also fake. Ethan took a deep breath. What about the promise to go back to City A? Was that also a trick on me? That was an expression I had never seen before. It seemed that he was barely holding back his sadness as he repeated the question to me. Was it also a trick? Yes. I looked at him quietly, as calm as he was when I begged him to open the door that night in the past. Ethan, I've already given you my answer. I won't be a mistress, and there's no way I'll go back to City A with you. The light in the corridor went out, and the light in Ethan's eyes gradually faded into the darkness. Okay. The door closed, and the dessert was left on the ground, not the slightest bit wet. My boss raised his eyebrows. He actually managed to buy it. He really did buy it, having bought it across the city overnight. I thought Ethan wouldn't show up again after that day, but he still appeared in front of me with breakfast. Do you think you're very affectionate? Ethan's throat tightened. I just want to see you. There was never anything between Sylvia and me from the beginning. We reached an agreement that after the arranged marriage, we would not interfere with each other. Chloe, can we? No, we can't. Exhaustion welled up in my heart, and I looked up at him. It's impossible. No matter what the agreement is, it can't change anything. I don't want to, and I won't. Ethan, consider it my begging you. Can you get out of my sight? When I said the last word, I realized that I wasn't as firm and resolute as I had imagined. Even though I had seen through everything, understood it, and made up my mind, I still felt sad in this repeated tug-of-war. This feeling was like a dull knife, cutting at my heart again and again. Ethan wanted to say something more, but when he met my gaze, he swallowed his words back. After that day, Ethan seemed to have returned to City A, and my life returned to peace again. It was just like walking the path I had walked out of 2 years ago all over again, with no difference from before. But until one overcast winter day, an unknown number suddenly contacted me. I recognized his voice. It was Cecil. He told me that after Ethan went back, he completely broke the engagement agreement with the Edwards family. This matter caused a great stir. The old man of the Thompson family was furious, and Ethan was beaten. But in the end, he somehow managed to make the Thompson family agree. He said that Ethan was coming to find me. I held the phone, and my heart started beating violently. There were few pedestrians on the street. Across the road, I saw Ethan's face gradually becoming clear. I'm sorry. Ethan looked at me and repeated it seriously. I'm sorry. The engagement with Sylvia has been cancelled. Chloe, can we go back to the way we were before? I stood there, stunned. At that moment, I felt a sense of being unable to say anything. What was there to say? In the past, I had been waiting for this impossible situation as if in a dream, waiting for Ethan to break off the engagement so that we could return to our old life. But after waiting for so long, I gradually realized that it was too unrealistic. But now, when the thing I had been looking forward to for so long suddenly appeared in front of me, besides shock, there was also a calm indifference. It was like receiving expired milk. I was still happy, but I knew I couldn't drink it and didn't want to either. Ethan seemed to want to say something, but I interrupted him. Forget it, Ethan. My eyes were burning. Let it go. Really, it was dry and cold in the winter. I looked up and saw the snowflakes that had quietly fallen without my notice. I can't forget what you did to me, and I can't act as if nothing happened. We broke up the moment you started hiding things from me. Even if you broke off the engagement, it has nothing to do with me anymore. The color drained from Ethan's face. His eyes turned red, and his voice trembled. Chloe, please don't be like this. Okay, I haven't told you yet. Our new house has been renovated. In the evening when the sun sets, the living room is filled with golden light, and it's very beautiful. There's a large garden outside the window. When spring comes, Ethan, the snowflakes that fell on my neck were cold. I turned my head away. Go back. The first snow of the winter fell on that day, and it was heavy. Ethan seemed to be in a daze for a long time. After that day, I deliberately avoided him. For a long time, the moment I met his gaze, I would change my direction in advance. Ethan was rich and bought the house I was renting now without making a sound. There was also a sum of money transferred to my account, but I was no longer as down and out as I used to be. Later, Ethan said he was going back to City A, and I didn't see him for a long time. After a while, I saw Ethan again, still at a dinner party. It was dusk, and the setting sun was shining. At that moment under the light, Ethan walked in with the light. Our gazes met in the air and then left again. This time, my heart was calm, without the slightest ripple. My colleague came over with a small piece of cake. Chloe, you're amazing. You got promoted again. Now you're my boss. You have to take care of me in the future. But the bad news is that the boss said this banquet is like your celebration party. He's still as stingy as ever. Boss, Why are you eavesdropping again? I turned around and saw the boss standing behind me. He shifted his gaze away from Ethan at the door and raised his eyebrows at me. He's an old acquaintance. Aren't you going to go up and say hello? Actually, I really didn't want to greet him. The dinner party was coming to an end. I leaned against the balcony, letting the cold wind blow on me. Ethan also came over. Congratulations. After these 3 words, there was a long silence accompanied by the cold wind. Ethan took out a cigarette and looked at me with his eyes asking, "Do you mind?" I shook my head. But in the end, he still didn't light it. It seemed that the temperature dropped again tonight. I saw snowflakes falling continuously in the night sky. It was very cold. I turned around and walked back inside. "Don't you have anything to say to me?" I thought for a moment. "Ethan, let's not meet again in the future. City A is thousands of miles away from here, and the probability of attending the same banquet at the same time is extremely small." Ethan squeezed the lighter in his hand, and a cluster of bright yellow flames sprang up, illuminating his face with an indescribable expression. This time, he finally lit the cigarette with the flame. Smoke curled up. Ethan smiled as if nothing had happened and said, "Chloe, you're not stupid at all." But as he smiled, by the light from inside the window, I saw that Ethan's eyes were all red. Ethan had been a very proud person since he was a child. I rarely saw him cry. Perhaps this was the only time, and also the last time. After being blown by the cold wind enough, I turned around and walked back. My colleague was still eating the small cake. The boss leaned against the wall, and his position happened to have a full view of the balcony. He raised his eyebrows at me again. "So you've finished saying hello, Franklin?" I looked at him. "Are you crazy?" Later, Ethan really didn't appear in front of me again, but I knew that he still hadn't left. But for me, it didn't matter much anymore. The heavy snow fell and covered everything. All I could see was white, and the world quieted down at that moment. Epilogue. Ethan had a car accident. It was caused by Sylvia when she was drunk. She had always had an easy life since she was a child and could get whatever she wanted. It was rare for her to like someone, and after waiting for 2 years, she got this result. She didn't understand, and she wasn't willing to accept it. Cecil looked at Ethan lying in the hospital bed and sighed. Sylvia drove under the influence and deliberately hurt someone. The Thompson family is already dealing with it. She can't get away with it. Ethan had lost his former calmness and composure, and his face was pale. He barely propped himself up and ignored Cecil's words. Staring blankly at the door, he saw Chloe. He hadn't seen her for a long time. She probably came to the hospital with a friend. She seemed to have made new friends again. She always had good popularity. Ethan wanted to say something, but when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he suddenly remembered what Chloe had said. He closed his mouth forcefully, but Chloe saw him. First, she saw Cecil, and then she turned her head and saw him. Ethan looked at her quietly, and his hand beside the hospital bed curled up slightly. He thought of many things that Chloe might say, but she didn't say anything. She just smiled at him. That smile was very faint, as if it would disappear with a gust of wind. Then she withdrew her gaze and left without any hesitation. Just as she said, they really became complete strangers. There wasn't even a trace of concern. Ethan's palm turned cold, and he suddenly seemed to remember something. TSK. It sounds harsh, but it's the truth. But as soon as he got out of bed, he fell heavily to the ground. Cecil immediately understood what he wanted to do, but when he rushed out, there was no sign of Chloe anymore. Ethan waited for a while until Cecil came back alone. The hospital room was quiet. Ethan's heart, which had just been full of hope, gradually calmed down again at this moment. He was still holding the ring in his hand that he had always carried with him. It was the ring he had prepared to propose to Chloe with when he cancelled the engagement and went to City B. He just didn't get the chance to propose at that time, and later there was no opportunity to give it to her. The scene in front of him became more and more blurred. With a rumble, the rain outside the window started to fall. It pattered on, as if it would never stop. The end.